Hi everyone, thank you for joining us online today for Friday Focus. Friday Focus is an online talk series that's hosted by the Hunterian, and we are the Museum and Art Gallery at the University of Glasgow. And in each edition of these talks, we'll hear from a different speaker and we cover a different topic. So we'll look at our exhibitions and displays happening in our venues, as well as research that goes on at the Hunterian and across the University of Glasgow. And we'll also look at all the work that happens behind the scenes with our collections. So today I'm really pleased to be joined by Eve Park, who is a postgrad museum studies student at the University of Glasgow. And Eve has been working alongside our art curator, Anne Delau, on the latest rotation of works on paper in the Hunterian Art Gallery, which also coincides with the 200th anniversary of the Royal Scottish Academy. So Eve's going to talk to us a little bit about that. But before I hand over to Eve, I just wanted to set the scene a bit, perhaps for those of you that might not have been to the Hunterian Art Gallery or who were not aware. Every few months, we rotate the works on paper on display in the venue. And with more than 30,000 items, our collection of works on paper is one of the largest in Scotland. And it really represents one of the great strengths of our art collection. But those works are sensitive to light, and so we limit the amount of time that we have them on display for. And that means that we can better care for and conserve our collections, but it also offers up so many opportunities for us to bring more of that collection onto public display. So if you haven't been, but you can come to the Hunterian Art Gallery, and if you can come more than once in the year, I really recommend that you do so that you can experience that for yourselves. So Eve's going to give us a presentation and then there'll be time at the end for any questions that you might have. You can pop your questions in the chat by clicking on the speech bubble at the very bottom of your screen, which should be like somewhere down there. And I will read those out for you at the very end. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us online today, and I will hand over to Eve now.
Hi everyone. So thank you for introducing. Yeah, I'm Eve. I was fortunate enough to be able to do my placement at the Hunterian Art Gallery this year, and we're focused on the paper collection. So, as explained, paper is an extremely sensitive material, and light exposure can significantly damage the works. So, just to reduce that, they are rotated round. There is 3 rotations in the year, and I had the pleasure of working on this one, which, as mentioned, coincides with the Royal Scottish Academy's 200th anniversary. Um, so I'll talk a wee bit about the developed themes behind the exhibition, how we found the selection and what's in the exhibition. I'll explain a little bit about the artwork as well as the artist that created it. And then I'll move on to talk a wee bit about the kind of broader themes that unite the exhibition aside from the RSA celebration, and explore a wee bit of behind the scenes about works that we wanted to include but didn't make the final selection, give them their time to shine, as well as talk about maybe a theme initially that we were trying to develop, but unfortunately, there wasn't enough to fill the exhibition in terms of the requirements we're working towards. So I'll talk a little bit about the 2 institutions that we focus on here. There is a blog that has just been released to the Hunterian website, and so I recommend you read that if you can as well, because I get to talk a little bit more in depth over there about these. But I'll do a little overview here for those that might not know. So the RSA was founded 58 years after the Royal Academy down in London. It was created by a group of artists who wanted to create a kind of Scottish equivalent to this. It aimed at supporting and promoting up and coming Scottish artists. And it's an independent artist led institution. It was established in Edinburgh. It's still based there. It's on the Mound. You'll probably have seen it if you've been to Edinburgh, just along from the National Galleries. And this is where the annual exhibitions take place. These have always taken place there, and they are a great opportunity for members and non-members to promote their art and get recognition from the Academy. This is really great for up-and-coming Scottish artists. And the status around this of the membership is a great achievement for artists who do. There's associate members, and then there's full RSA members. So sometimes artists will see sign the RSA or ARSA at the bottom of their work under their name. And the membership process is quite complex. So it's not so much that artists would apply. It's more so that elected members currently will either promote or recommend artists, and then it goes to kind of voting to see if to elect them in or not. And actually, until 2005, to become a full member, it was a kind of one in, one out system, which I thought was quite interesting. To be elected in, an existing member within the same disciplinary category, whether it was painting or architecture, actually had to either resign themselves or pass away before anyone else was able to come in and achieve full membership. Um, so that kind of inspired my thinking because it was such a complex kind of prestige process, and the status achieved was great. I thought it would be quite interesting to try and explore the artistic journeys that would have led to this point. And so that got me starting to think about a kind of developing theme that unites the exhibition. So that led me on to the Glasgow School of Art. All of the members in the exhibition are united under this theme. They have all studied at Glasgow School of Art. When I began researching in the collection, it seemed that this was a kind of steady theme. A lot of the members had studied here. So I thought this could be quite an interesting route to explore, right from the artist's very beginnings, right through to achieving this status. And so I'll tell you a little bit about the Glasgow School of Art. Again, I go more in depth here in the blog. I don't quite have the time as much here. So I recommend if you can read that, please do. But yeah, so the institution was founded in 1845. It was originally a technical school. It was founded by local manufacturers, and this was to train designers and architects up to be able to compete in the kind of booming manufacturing industry at Glasgow in this time. So it wasn't actually until the early 1850s that it becomes the Glasgow School of Art. It was originally the Glasgow Government School of Design. And it sounds maybe a bit silly in saying this, that it wasn't always as internationally recognised today. It wasn't actually until the late 18th century that it starts to become well known for its teaching. This is quite linked to the appointment of headmaster Francis Newbery, who put in quite a lot of reforms and changes that led the school to become what it is today. But I'll talk a bit more about that, as one of the artworks ties in quite nicely to that. So, notably in the exhibition, it's quite male dominated. We only have two female artists who I've got here. We do feature Mary Armour twice where possible. And this is kind of representative of the obstacles women were facing at this time. We are looking primarily at the 19th and early 20th century. And so although women could study at the Glasgow School of Art, the RSA was slightly slower to kind of recognise and admit women in to membership. And so it's partly representative of that. The Hunterian's collection, paper collection, is mainly from the 19th and 20th centuries, so that kind of helps explain this. So I'm opening with these two women to really give them their time to shine. Um, so on the left, I'll explain a wee bit more about the works in this section. The left, we've got the border designs. Mary Armour had to resign from teaching in 1927 because she was married, and therefore married women at this time just couldn't teach or work. Um, and so she's got quite an interesting story. She returns to teaching where possible during the war, only part-time. And then when she can, it's quite a nice full circle. She comes back to Glasgow to start teaching and is a great mentor to many influential Scottish artists. And yeah, she becomes governor and honorary president, so she's a very influential woman in her own right. She's the third woman to be elected into full membership for the RSA. And how the approach we took here, this is in the Reform in the Canon Room, and we're focusing on the change in perceptions of design, bringing in a bit more of that Francis Newbery conversation. He integrated design back into the core curriculum. Throughout the 19th century, although the school began as a design school and a technical school, there was more a demand in the 19th century for contemporary artwork just because it was one, more affordable and more readily available than the work of the old masters. And so it's becoming a bit more favourable to be an artist in this time. And a lot of middle class students at the Glasgow School of Art were wanting more kind of focus on fine art and the decorative painting side of things. And so that kind of created a bit of a divide between painters and designers at this time. And Francis Newbery's reforms, integrating design back into the core course, kind of levelled this divide of the finer and the lesser arts, the higher and the lesser arts. So this piece is a testament to that. As we see, it is signed steel, so it is lightly from student and early teaching years. So that's a nice testament to the design. On the right, we've got Joan Eardley, a wee bit of a departure from the work maybe we're typically used to seeing that focuses in and around Glasgow. This work is from Italy. We think it's from a wee Italian town called Assisi. Um, and here she expresses quite a bit of frustration of the work she created at this time. She feels she can't communicate with the locals, and she can't sit long enough to really observe her surroundings. And therefore, she feels she's lacking to capture the story element. It's just a visual response to her surroundings. Um, and she was fortunate enough to be able to travel here on scholarship from Glasgow School of Art, but also from the RSA. She won a student competition, and the funds from that contributed to this to allow her to go. So these two artists, obviously Eardley is creating slightly later, so we see there's starting to be a wee bit more support for female artists, which is nice to see. Moving on, we have the largest cabinet in the gallery. So as we said, they're interdispersed, the works throughout the gallery, so you maybe wouldn't inherently know that there is a kind of set exhibition with a set theme. Here, this becomes most evident as we can see the bottom photo as the work's been installed. The one above that was us trialing out for the first time, getting them all together, which was lovely to see. They have since then been remounted, as you can see by the second in from the right. So yeah, the pass away from Glasgow here, the theme kind of really comes alive. We're focusing on those shared beginnings at Glasgow School of Art. They often gave scholarships to their most talented students at the end of the year. And so many of these artists within the cabinet have received scholarships. So going on from these shared beginnings, we're focusing on the different stories and experiences and how they got abroad and their techniques and evolution. Which is a nice kind of string of artistic journeys, I think, that really complements the exhibition. So I'll explain a little bit about these. I can't go too in depth given the time as well, but starting from the left, we've got James Patterson. He was one of the Glasgow boys, one of the first to go to France and study quite significantly in France. And so there's a lot of French tonal values that comes across in his work. But here instead we've focused on a work that is from the Canary Islands. So Patterson travelled quite a lot abroad due to his wife's ill health. They travelled to warmer climates to help to try and aid this. Um, so this piece is from the Canary Islands, and there is also some journals from this time that are obviously quite fraught with concern for his wife, but these are all available to the public in the collection if anyone would like to read them. They do make a really interesting read. And moving on, we've got the second piece by George Henry. This piece, he was funded to go to Japan by a major Glasgow art dealer, Alexander Reid, as well as major collector William Burrell. He travelled with another artist and they wanted to capture like authentic Japanese life and culture. Although at this time Europeans were refined to certain areas they weren't really allowed to travel out with. So the pair actually worked as house agents with a Japanese national to be able to explore a wee bit more of Japan. I used air quotations for authentic here just because we need to treat it with a wee bit of caution. There was a lot of Yokohama sashin in their collections and their studios. And this is kind of souvenir photography for tourists. And so it's kind of through a kind of Western ideal lens as to what people would have wanted to be seeing and buying. And so there's quite a lot of influence drawn from these. So yeah, that's the George Henry. We then move on to Colquhoun, who is actually the only non-RSA member in the exhibition. But I think this piece is a real testament to Glasgow School of Art and the artistic community within it. So Colquhoun unfortunately passed quite young, but this piece is done in Italy just after art school, and he was able to go again on scholarship. But it's got a lovely kind of story around it in this regard to scholarship. So the governors at Glasgow School of Art expressed a bit of difficulty in picking who to award the scholarship to. It was between Colquhoun or his long-term partner and fellow artist Robert McBride. So even though they awarded Colquhoun the award, they felt that he was likely to divide the funds to be able to let both artists go. And to ensure that the artists be able to spend more time abroad, the chairman and the governors actually matched the funds out of his own pocket to give to the pair to allow them to travel there. So it's a nice kind of testament to the school and the support they were receiving. And actually, on return, the artist gifted two works to the governor. So that's a nice little story around it that complements quite nicely. To the right, we've got William Crosby. He had quite a traditional sense, departure from art school in the sense he went to Paris, which was quite common, and he studied under two really prominent figures in painting and sculpture. Here he kind of played about with surrealism and cubism. We obviously see this work as a departure from both of them, so it's probably just an observational sketch. It is of the American Club in Paris, which was an institution for English-speaking artists in Paris. So yeah, it's a lovely little piece. And just to the right of that, finally, we've got James Kay. He was a bit harder to research. There's not so much on him, but we do have a lot of exhibition records that suggest he was exhibiting quite widely across Europe. This piece is from the Netherlands, and it's quite a departure from his other work. He does paint a lot of river scenes and city scenes, however, it's the style and the techniques of this piece that reflect more influence from the Hague School, which prioritised mood and tones rather than focus on fine details. So that is the cabinet. What you might initially notice, but not inherently realise what it could be on the James Kay piece, is it has had a fair amount of damage to it over time. The tide lines we see down the middle that I've highlighted in that wee circle, we can see that kind of reflected on the back. So quite often the materials in backing boards as well as mount boards they can react, they can have an acidic reaction when they start to break down or if they're exposed to moisture. Um, so unfortunately, that is what's happened here. So that's why we see it coming through the front, and the paper itself is showing signs of embrittlement and is slightly becoming discoloured. So we were fortunate enough to be able to have this work on exhibition, but after this, it will be at least 3 years before it can either go on loan or be displayed, just to kind of slow down this process. Moving on, we have the next cabinet, major cabinet within the art gallery. Here we're really focusing on Ian Fleming, who was a modern printmaker, like a modern maker of printmaking. And these pieces were a great find when we found them. The photos here show us we've just found them at this stage. They are displayed up next to each other in the art gallery, alongside the tools that I've got included to the right. And this just really lets you see the printmaking techniques a lot more. The wee tools at the side, the wee ones with the wooden handles, these are the burins. So these kind of essentially act as the artist's pencil. They're drawing the lines into the steel plate. The plate is often warmed because it's covered in a kind of acidic ground. Um, and it's often warmed to darken the surface, which makes it a lot easier for the artist to see the lines, which is always helpful. Um, but yeah, the wee scraper in the middle effectively acts as a sort of rubber. It takes the top layer of the plate off, so it allows for the artist to adjust any of the design or erase any mistake that they're not quite happy with. But there's a real range of techniques used here. We've got aquatint, which is applying bits of resin, and that helps create tonal value because ink sticks. So we see that kind of in the darkened areas of the seaweed and the fish, and just to the left of the fish. And that helps create a lot of fluidity, I think, of the piece, which is depicting a rock pool. Um, and it's also a screen print, so this means it's pushed through a kind of fine layer of mesh, and that further helps create the texture. And yeah, it's a lovely piece to see together. The wee pad that's there as well, the plate sits on top of that, and just helps absorb the shock of the process, and also just makes it a lot easier for the artist to maneuver. Um, so yes, this was a great find when we found it. It is lovely if you can get along to see it. So I'll talk a little bit before I move on about my personal favourites. On the left, we've got John Byrne, who I think has such a unique artistic journey and story. The piece itself is quite striking. It's quite a big piece. But John Byrne was convinced to go to art school by a friend that worked with him in the slab room. So he left his job and he began at art school. And he found it quite restrictive. So he was actually told that he had to resit his first year because he'd prioritised the drawing and painting side of things and neglected the rest. And instead of resitting his first year, he then makes a controversial move for this time, and transfers to the Edinburgh College of Art. Um, and here, ironically, he finds it even worse. So he does come back to Glasgow School of Art for his diploma year. Here then he graduates, he's a pretty prominent artist by the time he's graduating. But oddly enough, of some of John Byrne's work is signed under the name Patrick. It's his father's name. And he'd done this for around 10 years. He would exhibit under his father's name, and as a self-proclaimed kind of self-taught artist, to break into the London art scene. So yeah, he takes an almost 20-year break from exhibiting. This piece here is from after that time, and it's part of a space portfolio, which was a big collaborative portfolio by the Glasgow Print School. And yeah, it's full of really influential artists. It's a great piece to see. And finally, we've got Duncan Shanks. He is a quote I love that we've used, is that drawn is a craven he's never managed to satisfy, which I think is such a nice testament that complements the work nicely. And it's definitely reflected in the 106 sketchbooks that the Hunterian alone have. So that equates to about 6,500 drawings that we as the Hunterian have. And he's got quite an expressionist style. He takes a lot of inspiration from the nature around him, primarily in the Clyde Valley where he lives. Um, and this is in the Reform in the Canon Room. So it's taken a wee bit of a different approach. Sketchbooks, these are pages out of a sketchbook that have been framed together. And the kind of thought process we had around this is that sketchbooks are often quite private and personal. And so we might see some artistic freedom and creativity that we might not see in finished works for display. So that was a nice little spin on it. We have got a wee section here on work that we didn't manage to include, just for various reasons, but I thought I'll give them a wee moment to shine here. And so we have John Byrne again on the left. So this was initially going to be the centerpiece of the Pass Away from Glasgow cabinet. It's got quite a nice story. So Byrne received a major scholarship to travel abroad. This should have lasted him about a year away. And he was back in Glasgow 3 weeks later, having been conned out of his money. So the art school actually gave him the same sum again, let him go and travel back to Italy. And funnily enough, on the way back, it was quite common for Glasgow School of Art to host solo exhibitions for the students that they gave a scholarship to. And back on arrival, Byrne had had most of his works in a kind of briefcase that he left in a janitor's cupboard of the Glasgow School of Art, thinking he could come back at the end of the day, and they were never seen again. So we had to work quite quickly to fill the gaps for that exhibition. So yeah, that was a nice piece. That wasn't included just purely because it was too big for the cabinet. It's quite a large piece height-wise, and so it wouldn't be supported at the back, unfortunately. On the right, this would have been in the Reform in the Canon Room that I was just talking about. These pieces were going to kind of go up next to each other and really just focus on that the reshaping perceptions around design and the influence Glasgow School of Art had on that. However, this would have left holes in walls, and there wasn't really enough time to fill them, paint the walls, so that's why we don't see them there. But the border designs are a lovely complement to that room regardless. Finally, we have Josephine Haswell Miller. Her work, she was actually the first ARSA female member to be elected. And she also received scholarships from Glasgow, as well as taught at Glasgow School of Art. And so she was able to travel quite a lot. So it's likely that these pieces are either from her student years when she could travel or the flexibility in her later life. However, these works are unmounted. Most of her work is unmounted. And unfortunately, we have fortunately, we have quite a large loan going out. So that put a wee bit more restrictions on work that could be properly mounted and everything. Although these pieces may well have ended up in the Pass Away from Glasgow as well. So before I finish up, I'll talk a wee bit about a theme that we had initially that didn't quite make it. We were initially looking at depictions of childhood, how RSA and Scottish artists were exploring childhood, kind of linking through with childhood and innocence and linking that to motherhood, and maybe how this evolved over time. So the two artists on the left are older works which display the more kind of innocent facade that we see, and then on the right hand side we've got slightly more contemporary work which depicts a wee bit more of the kind of fun and messiness of childhood, which is slightly more fitting to how most of us know. So yeah, this was a theme that was beginning to get developed. We could have felt the cabinet that the Pass Away from Glasgow is on, but unfortunately we wouldn't have been able to link this up with the rest of the exhibition, just with other themes that we're working to. So we wanted to have a united theme across the board rather than just in the one cabinet. So So yes, that is it. Thank you for listening. Again, if you'd like to know a little bit more, I'll talk about that in the Hunterian blog that just went out about 2 days ago. So if you'd like to read some more, please feel free. And please do visit the gallery if you can, because there's nothing quite like seeing the works in person. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Eve. That was really, really lovely to listen to you talk about that journey and the connections that you've made with the artists and their schooling, and also to see like some of this, the techniques and artist materials as well. It was really interesting. If anyone's got any questions, you can pop them in the chat for Eve, and I will read them out. I have a few questions for you, actually, Eve. So just going back a bit, it was nice to see you talk about maybe kind of like, I don't know, the unglamorous behind the scenes of some of the work. So I'm thinking about that James Kay work where you showed the back of it and some of the damage that had happened to it. I just wondered if maybe there was anything new or surprising that you learned through this process about conservation of artworks.
I feel from this, there's so much that can be told from the back of artwork, so much that we don't see. We've done a little bit of this in the course, um, but you can learn so much more, and you can see like the real use that these paintings have had. Do you know, it feels like you can get a sense of their history a little bit more. They've been used and loved, and that's probably likely why they're in the condition they are. Um, so yeah, it's really nice to see that other side of things that we don't see in the exhibition space.
Amazing, thank you. And yeah, and you spoke about like the artist journeys and like artists abroad, and also their teaching experience, their experience in schooling. And I just wondered maybe what do you hope that visitors will take away from learning about the artist journey, when they see these works on display beyond what they might learn from the artworks themselves?
I hope it kind of makes people maybe not necessarily that they won't appreciate the work beforehand, but I think it helps you appreciate it a little bit more. I feel like, and even learning more about the RSA, I had a whole new appreciation for the artists and how they got there, and I think that makes you really value their stories more. Um, and yeah, just really like looking over the full scale. We've got the finished work in front of us, but how did they get there? Do you know, what has the artist been through to create that? I think that tells us a lot.
Great, thank you. There is a question in the chat from Rachel, and she has asked, do we have any information about the John Byrne work and why it's called Newfoundland? You know.
Oh, I don't personally have any. I was trying to research a little bit more about the space portfolio, but I was struggling quite a bit to find much on it. It is available to buy and copy from the Glasgow Print Studio, and so I'd be assuming if you reach out to them, they would be able to tell you a little bit more about that as well.
Amazing, thank you. I had one last question actually just around the childhood theme. So you spoke about there's more that you explore around the particular themes that you selected for the rotation in the blog, but also the childhood theme that kind of didn't couldn't amount to anything in the display. I wondered if that's something that you hope to explore further in writing, or if that's another opportunity that you might want to look at in your work.
Yeah, definitely. I think initially it was a really interesting theme to look at how it's because it kind of reflects wider societal changes on perceptions of childhood and motherhood and expectations and values. Because artwork is so representative of that. So I'd love to delve more into that. Definitely.
Yeah. I think beyond like that connection with the RSA, there are other things like other artworks in the collections that you can make connections with around like
Yeah,
motherhood.
yeah, definitely.
Amazing. Thank you so much again, Eve. And I did share the blog in the chat with everyone, but I'll share it round via email to everyone that signed up today. And there will be a recording made available of this talk, hopefully soon on our YouTube channel, but I will also share that with everyone. And if you can come to the Hunterian Art Gallery and see the rotation, please do. So thanks, Eve, and thanks everyone for joining us online today. And I hope you all have a lovely weekend when it comes.